Okay? You always know a coach by their clipboard. I was noticing that. This is my third broken one of the season, but I was wondering how many coaches in here have obviously broke some clipboards. But I want to thank Marco, too, for reaching out and giving me this opportunity. I'm one of your grandchildren of the NWAC, and I feel really special about the conference. And one of the things, I just had got done speaking to some leadership groups at University of Washington, and then sports management and administration at Seattle U, and I spoke in Boise 2 years ago on trying to build a culture. And that was something that Marco had reached out of maybe re-looking at our culture for the NWAC, but this also goes towards your teams. So I'll try to base it back and forth and then leave the back end of the lecture open for discussion. But first of all, I want to recognize all of you for being a part of student athletes' lives. Number one, you're doing the best thing you can do, and obviously my opinion, to influence our future. And anytime we're involved with athletics, there's a lot to do with it. And I've got just a lot of great friends in here. Scott Rogers, how we used to compete. You know, Greg said Nate, who's one of my players. My Edmonds boys back there that we recruit with now, and obviously Jim Jackson, who was actually my first boss at Clackamas when Dale Stebbins wasn't going to hire me at Mount Hood. Robbie Robinson hired me at Clackamas, so we go back a long way. As we look into this, I'll kind of piece it from a team standpoint. I thought this was more of administrative. You can make this into a team situation. The reason I wrote this up, and we revisited this last year, when we started the program at Seattle U, we had no baseballs, no field, no conference. We had 6 scholarships of the 11.7, and I'd gone through something very similar at Lane when I took over for Bob Foster, who had kind of deteriorated in our baseball world because of a brain tumor. So I was fortunate enough to work at Clackamas for a year, and we tied for the division title and had my first head coaching opportunity at Lane. I came into a situation where they were 6 or 8 and 24, 26. I should have looked before I came down. And we got the job on August 10th. I hired 3 coaches. We recruited. And in our first year, we were 28 and 10 and won a conference championship. So it was a really quick turnaround for an organization based on some of the principles that we'll talk about. Going forward into Seattle U, as I said, we have nothing to offer. And it was just a great opportunity. I talked to my wife, and one of the things we wanted to do is obviously be in an environment where we could start something from scratch again and then have opportunities to hopefully influence it. But it's been a great reign, and hopefully some of these things will help you from a team standpoint or from a conference standpoint. And again, as we go along the way, we'll ask some questions. Number one is we're rebuilding our brand and our culture at Seattle U. We started, and our first year we had 28 JC guys and 4 high school guys as we started baseball from scratch. We had no Division I experience. We had a transfer from University of Oklahoma. Doug Buser was our only kid that had Division I experience. So we got our tails kicked. And Scotty will love this. Our first game against Washington State to open up, baseball hadn't been at Seattle U for 26 years. We're down 7-4 in the 7th. And then our shortstop kicks 2 balls and we lose 11-4. 11-6 by the time it was over. And I thought, God, coaches, we're not that close. I mean, we're not that far away. I mean, we're right there. The next game we lost 23-0. So that ball sits in my office where you walk in, and I look at that thing every day to see how far we needed to come as a program. So we went 11 wins, 21 wins, 24 wins, 25 wins, then went back to a 21, 31, and then 37 2 years ago to have more wins than any Division I school in Washington. We start the 2017 season with votes in the top 40 in the country for the first time in the school's history from our little private Jesuit Catholic school in Seattle. We went through 11 DLs or injuries and went from obviously having some picks or votes nationally to just barely making our tournament. And what we did as coaches is we had to revisit our culture. Because what happened from our standpoint, and I know a lot of you are either in winning situations or you're trying to be in winning situations. I know Scotty does a great job at Edmonds. This thing was flowing, and we took advantage of it a little bit. We didn't revisit this that I'll get to, what we used to start every fall with. We figured our juniors and seniors, and in your standpoint, that's why I love junior college. baseball or sports, you get that new student athlete every year. You can infect them right away. Well, we took advantage of what we thought the culture was, and what happened to us is our seniors let us down. And I'm not saying that where I haven't said it to them physically, because they were worried about the draft. We've had 11 guys drafted now in the last 7 years, and which is just a great number for us. But they were worried about the draft. We had a guy that was the 33rd ranked prospect in the country, a left-handed arm, that was worth about $3 million. He broke down. The NWAC pitcher the year from the year before, who was worth $500,000, he broke down. All of a sudden, as coaches, we were working with our third-tier player. And we didn't do a good job with that. We didn't prepare. I think all of us as coaches prepare for that first person to go down. You have your backup plan. But we didn't prepare for that next person to come in. So that was our fault, which is part of us missing our culture. The other part of it was those seniors that were worried about more things that they can't control went away from what helped build a program to maintain a strength that it was and to keep us moving in the same direction. So on this, and I wrote about the history of the NWAC. When I go to your guys' website, it drives me crazy. And I'm being honest, because I can't find anything. One, when I put, it used to be NWAACC when we were younger. And now when I go to NWAC, there's like 6 different things that come up. It's hard to get to our website. So one, as we're starting to build our culture, I think we need to give more identity to the NWAC conference. I think it's a great, great conference. And I'm not saying it because I coached in it. I'm saying it because I recruit in it. And the easier it is for us to find information, it's from four-year colleges or for student athletes looking for possible places to go. And Marco, I hope I'm not going to tick some people off in here. I mean, that's our society now. That same web page and that same way to get to that staff directory's been there a long time. And I'm not stomping on anyone's fingers, so I know we're all overworked and stuff, but we need to pop this thing again. I look at some of the things, and I wrote this down. I told Jim Jackson, I showed him this before I came up here. Some of the guys that I had an opportunity to be around, Dick McLean, phenomenal. You know, Jim Jackson, Dale Stebbins, Greg Hawk, John Spiesel, some people that I was around during those NWAC times. How about we highlight some of the best coaches or administrators or people that are in the conference and say why? You know, the websites in the Division I level, and that doesn't mean we're better than anyone else, they've gone away from a lot of story stuff. And it's just pictures and highlights of things that pop to your eye right away to get you excited about it. But if we're going to brand or create a culture, we need to use a little bit of our history of why this conference is so good. Why Seattle U is so good. When we first started, there was a 26-year absence. Well, they had 31 players drafted in 25 years. We honored those guys. It gave us a little bit something to look forward to as we recruited that first class of kids that just didn't know if they were going to play Division I baseball. Hold on to your history a little bit and use it for your sport. If you're a brand new coach at one of the colleges and you don't know the history, that's the first thing. Good or bad parts of the history, find out about it and somehow try to bring those people back into a part of the program, especially the special ones that were somewhere in that history that made that program good, or the NWAC as a whole. So that's one on our cultures. When I put the Lane Titans, Harlan Wyardy was a great mentor to me. He was my first athletic director, second after Jim. Excuse me, because I want to give Jax his deal. Harlan Wyardy is still a big part of my life. You know, he still does Esteen Mountains, and Kay, his wife, was actually a teaching partner with my wife. And this guy had a fierce competitiveness for all of us to win. I know the 80 there now, the 80 that's there now is pretty similar to that. Look at his record. And I wrote Greg Sheely down, and hell, I didn't even know he was going to be here. But just as far as, look at some of the things we're doing. If you're an administrator in the room, help the coaches get to the next level. I didn't go into Lane Community College planning on being there for the rest of my life. And some of us as coaches, if we want that, that's great. But administrators, when I got the coach, when we finally won it in 1999, Harlan Wyardy went to the ABCA, got him on the phone, fought for 3 days, and then at the convention, I got to stand up on stage as the ABCA ABCA Community College Coach of the country. He didn't have to do that. And it put me on a little piece of a map where all of a sudden, and I turned down Case twice at Oregon State and Mooney at Washington State a few times to make that next step, because I wasn't done at Lane trying to build something. But I would have never did it without Harlan Wardy. He was phenomenal. Bob Foster, who was there before me, as I said, sadly, obviously passed away from a brain tumor. He set the foundation for a program that was going to go under. They fundraised to keep that thing going. I know all of us in here have sold oranges and grapefruits. We used to sell them by the truckload just to make sure that we could continue to build our program, but it was through the support of our administration. So administrators, you have a huge impact on obviously the longevity of your coaches. As you look into the leadership part of it, and again, I think this is, we're going to go over this with our guys. It's obviously revamped up as we go back to the board that I'll get to. But what type of leader are you based on where you're at in your organization? If you're an administrator, I want you to read some of those things later and see how clear your standards are. Do you have standards for your department? If you're a coach, do you have standards for your student athletes? Yes, academics, as Greg said, has been a huge part of my life all the way through, because as I had my opportunities graduating from Little North Bend, Oregon, I had an opportunity to sign in football, opportunity to sign in basketball, and an opportunity to sign in baseball, and eventually played professional baseball. But the academic piece is so huge. What type of standards do you have for your student athletes? And I question this to any administrators or people that have people work under them. Do they really have clarity of what you want done? I've been to a lot of different colleges, and the thing that's the most frustrating part when GAs come up and talk to the coaches or associate athletic directors is the clarity that's not coming from their supervisor. So whatever leadership role you have, you need to really grab it and get to the side and figure out in detail what you want from your employees. If you're a coach, you need to detail this thing out and let your student athletes know exactly what you want from them. I didn't do that last year. I assumed that it was going to carry on with our seniors, and we faltered. So if we're in a department, if you're on a team, obviously if you're within the NWAC office, if you're not detailed in what you're trying to accomplish for the whole big entity, at some point you're going to have 11 guys on the DL, or gals, because I know you guys get hurt too. So just be aware of that from a leadership standpoint. On B, just get your young people to give selfishly and work tirelessly. I'll tell you, we're in a great situation in sports because we just went through 14 transitions at Seattle University. And the thing that always drives me crazy is, as we do our postings, and this is at any college, must have head coaching experience. Must have experience as a lead in marketing. Some of the best people that are out there are just waiting that don't have experience. How the hell do you get experience if you never get hired? Give the people that work under you as much responsibility as you can. Let them have on their resume, I've got some marketing experience. I know, Scotty, let your coach say, I'm the offensive coordinator. I run the entire offense at Edmonds Community College. Nate Pratt does, obviously. Give people responsibilities so they can create some sort of a resume to elongate their career. Administrative wise too, don't try to take on so much where you're taking away from someone else. C, leader, and you can read through the other stuff. I know that you guys have done this. Wait, go back to A. I love this. Average people or teams have quotes up on their walls. Good teams have plans. Exceptional teams have systems. And we'll get to the systems on the back page of the systems we create. But we can always have a lot of great quotes and fiery speeches and stuff. And then if we don't have any follow through or some sort of a program or system for us to move the tank forward, it's never going to go anywhere. So back down to C, this leaders create culture. Culture creates behavior. Behavior produces results. The one thing you can give your organization every day is your energy. If you look at the top left, energy, attitude, and effort. If you get nothing else out of this, except remember my dog's name Wrigley. She's a good duck dog. Brooklyn's after the Dodgers and Easton's after the bat, and he plays and runs cross country. So tell me how much sense that makes. But remember those top three: your energy, your attitude, and your effort. If you're really sitting in here because you want to make an impact in student athletes' lives, or within a community's eyes because of the college that you're at, or if you want to help develop the colleges that work under you because you work for the NWAC office, bring those three pieces to the table every single day. It's a total choice. If you find that you can't bring those three pieces to the table, then I would look for another occupation because you're not giving what you can to help produce a better, obviously, environment. Okay, it's a great question I have for my coaches every time. When I started at Seattle U, I had coaches that wanted to be assistant coaches, which is okay. I mean, they said that, and by the time we got to year 4, I'd fired them both. And it wasn't based on anything more except I was not seeing the same plan of attack just based on what they were wanting to accomplish compared to what we were trying to accomplish as an organization. It was nothing against them. So the next 3 guys I hired all wanted to be head coaches. Mike Nato from Pierce College that won an NWAC. Elliot Kribbe, who played for Scott, played for me at University of Washington, and then was obviously a coach at Abilene Christian. We brought him back, wants to be a head coach. Jeff James, which is Don James's grandson, I coached him at University of Washington, wants to be a head coach. All of a sudden we go to 27, 31, 37 wins. Because they're tireless. They want an opportunity to get in front of one of you administrators and say, I'd like to be your head coach. So keep that in mind. Second page, the line. This is from Urban Meyer. And I imagine a lot of you guys read books and business books and inspirational books and stuff. But I stole this from him, and I know as coaches we steal stuff from everybody. I love this. You're either going to be above the line on stuff that you do or below the line. And this is a big push with our guys. And just real quick, above the line, intentional, with purpose, without thought, nothing's accidental. But better than that, look at below the line. Finger pointing, complaining, and defending one's ego. It's not my fault. As administrators or leaders, and the assistant coaches that are in here, you are the most important pieces of our programs. The most important pieces, because as head coaches, Scotty, how much paperwork are you doing? Just a bit. And Roger says his baseball coaches do tons of baseball paperwork. Wormy's in there. But your assistants is our bloodline. And what I want you, or would challenge you as assistant coaches, because a lot of times you're younger than us old timers, is don't get too close to the present. Right at Christmas, you can't go and shake that box. Create relationships with those student athletes, but you're our key of keeping our student athletes above the line. We talk about staying on the road too. Did anyone watch that, read that book, The Road? You want to read that? It's pretty eerie. Terrible book. Did you watch the movie?
No.
Oh, I'll rent it to you sometime if you want to watch it. Anyway, of keeping everybody on the road, your assistant coaches, you keep us above the line. If you watch players, and it doesn't matter at what sport, when the head coach is watching them get after it, they're getting after it. When they turn away, and we'll get to that 20, 60, 20, that's 60% of those guys are going to take a step off because they think they can take advantage of assistant coaches if they're not given the same responsibility or the same abilities as the head coach. You guys are our lifeline to keep this thing above the line. Administrators too, obviously I think the higher up we go, the more maybe respectful you are to your athletic director. He or she's going to make a decision if you have a job. Our lifeline, or what I've learned our lifeline, my associate athletic director is the most important person in my staff. He or she gets to say yes and no before he takes it to he or she as the head athletic director. And he keeps us in line. Eric Greer, great associate athletic director. So play with that a little bit. You can use your own terminology, but it sure takes away a lot of finger pointing You know, all of us, we never want to take accountability to an extent, and we always say that's our best ability we can have is accountability. Then as we get to the system, and this is where I obviously got this wheel up here. When I went up to Seattle, the Seattle Sounders, who obviously have had some success, and the Seattle Seahawks had what's called a Wheel of Success. But we didn't feel we could create one in our first year because we didn't have anyone that knew what Division I athletics was all about as far as the competitiveness. So year 2, after we had a full year and we went 11-39, really good job, coach. We went camping for 3 days. And we created this, and the outsides are, and the birds are just amazing Twitter. Oh, that's okay. So the outsides are stolen. Okay, this is the same thing the Sounders and the Hawks use. Who we are, what we honor, how we view life, and those we serve. Our guys got to come up and they had rationale for who we were going to be as a culture standpoint at Seattle U. So this was some of obviously the things that they came up with. For the first time in my history there, this will be our 6th year after creating that, we're going to revisit the wheel. It's a different generation. Okay, and I say that respectfully because the one thing I want you to understand, or I hope you understand as coaches or as people that are hiring young people to work for you, the millennials, they're no different than we were. They just learn different. But they want discipline. They want success. They want to have some fun like we did. I don't like hearing that this new age is different. They're different, but they're the same as how they want to be coached, taught, and obviously inspired to move forward. So we use this, so we're going to revisit it this year. Because maybe nowadays conviction isn't as strong a point for my 2018 kids as it was for my 2011 kids. And I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. Are they open-minded enough anymore? I don't know if we're as open-minded maybe with this group because everything that they see isn't a lot of through verbiage or through conversation. It's fact, because they can look it up. So it'll be interesting when we do this with our guys to revamp our culture because we lost part of it, and to see how they come back and recreate the new wheel, so to speak, of success. For us, this sits right as you walk through the office up into the locker room. We have our 11 pro guys on the locker room going across. They walk in, and then they create everything that they want inside the locker room every year. The seniors are required to come up with some sort of slogan that we're going to live by. The freshmen come up with some sort of slogan that they don't want to abide by. Hazing's been brought up twice. Just because, and they're not going to get hazed, but we would prefer to not be hazed. Okay? It's a good rule. We'll move on with that one. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have something. I think it's great to have something visual, again, but it makes you just good. Then you've got to follow through with it and make sure that you revisit these every time you go about doing your business. So that's how we create the system. The last page, and I think this is an important part, and I think hopefully Greg can relate to this when I was there. If you look at a team driven by an intentional culture, attitude, and effort, this is for us. Okay, and you can answer your own question. When we talk about the road or the system, these are the people I meet with prior to our fall starting. Strength trainers, training room, academic support, our business manager, our game ops, our field crew, our concessions people, our campus ministry, our sports supervisor, our managers, our GAs, our food service people, and I meet with our janitors. Those are the people I want on the same road that we're walking. They've got to know exactly what we're expecting out of our student athletes. I want Javier to come and tell me if there is trash on my locker room floor, because he will not pick it up, I've told him, out of the graciousness of his heart. That's one of our standards. We're not going to rely on other people to pick up after us. So wherever you are as far as what your piece of the puzzle is at your school, who can you make sure that's on the same page with you? Our gals that come in and clean our office eat better than any one of our guys on campus. I bring them smoked fish, elk, deer. They all love game meats. I love to kill game. They like to eat me. But we take care of those gals because they're just phenomenal for us. All the gear we get, they get. All the gear we get, our campus minister gets. How involved or how influenced have you made people that you work with feel like they're a part of your team? Because I'm telling you, at some point, remember Guy, our field guy, he was horrible. Bless his heart. But he was on the back end getting ready to retire, man. We did everything we could to get this guy on board, and it was just the back end. And finally, after the last couple years, that we were there, he finally bought in because he trusted us. He didn't know the new kids on the block and how we were going to work and stuff. Get the people that work under you to feel really, really important. I guarantee they help you. And I guarantee you're going to need something at some point, and when it's an ask, you'll get it before someone else. I've got a scholarship problem right now with an equivalency based on financial aid. So I call our gal who has this meeting with us before we start the year, and don't tell this to our athletic director, but before volleyball, before cross country, track and field, and before our soccers, she ran all of our compliance number before these teams are even starting their season and they have priority. She stayed an extra night just to get all this stuff done. Just out of a simple ask because of the 3 years prior that she's been there of just making sure that she gets a Christmas present. I mean, simple thank yous to make people feel like they're a part of your culture and that they can obviously help you. So you can read the formula. Our big thing on B is 5 phases strong. You can create your own world, but we talk 5 phases strong all the time. And Scotty, just so you know, the quality pitching also includes running game. So I don't want you to think I left out running game. But we go 5 strong, and that's what we're going to work on every day as far as staying above the line. And then if you look at culture at the end, when Case got that first club to go to Omaha down at Oregon State, I just left as they went to Omaha and went to Washington. We had one player on that team that was a national draft person, a guy named Dallas Buck, who was really, really good. Other than that, we had a bunch of nobody Northwesterners that was the perfect pieces to the puzzle because of how they committed themselves to the program, and then they won. For coaches, it's not about being the most talented, it's about finding the best ingredients. Because you can be more talented and lose. You find the better ingredients in kids that are tougher, boys or girls, as far as wanting something more, you'll win. From a school standpoint, it's the same thing. So that culture part at the end is just finding the right pieces of the puzzle and getting everyone to go in the same direction. But it's got to start from whatever part of the puzzle you are. So if you're a lead person in here, you lead. If you're a secondary person, there's still someone to lead. If you're under that, there's still someone to lead, all the way down into the student athletes where it flips back up, or if I'm an administrator, all the way down to that janitor like we're talking about, and it flips back up where everyone feels like they're on the same page to create some sort of a culture that is just relentless to not have success. With that, if there's any questions, I will try to answer them the best I can. Marco, I don't even know my timeline, doesn't matter, because hopefully you got something out of that. If there's something as you look through that didn't make sense, but any questions on the corporate ladder of coaching, going from an assistant JC guy at Taft Junior College, California, to finally getting a head job, or from being in the NWAC to the transition of Division I of what it was like, or anybody? Our guys, it's mandatory one question. It couldn't have been that bad.
Coach,
Yeah.
you have the 20-60-20 on there.
Yeah, good point.
You touched on it a little bit with the head coach turning away. Can you go more into
Sure, yeah, the 20-60-20, it's an old business model. And as you present what your culture is going to be or what your plan is based on whatever piece of the puzzle you're on, 20% of your people are going to be invested right away. They're going to do everything that they are asked, and they'll believe in what you're telling them. Okay, 60% of our population that we work with is going to sit right on that fence. They don't know what way they're going to go. So they're going to need some influencing. The biggest influence comes from that top 20%. For all of us, obviously as a leader or as an administrator or as a coach, the player still rules, or the employee still rules over the employer. And then 20%, you have a hard time ever turning them. And what you look at with that last 20%, this was in the 7 Habits of Successful Businesses, or however you pronounce that one. The 20% where you're trying to deal with them is make sure they do not go sour on you. So one of the things we actually do with our JC guys that we recruit, and we consider them a 20% because we don't really know them, is to make sure if we're going to recruit a junior college kid, they've got to play for us. I don't want to bring in a 21-year-old alpha male and say, you get to sit over here. It's not fair to him. You know, and we talk about that in sports a lot, to find a place where you can play. So those JC guys we bring in that we plan on playing, but obviously a lot of things can happen, we ask that question, will you ever get tired of not playing? And if you do not play, will you ever be a bad seed? Well, what's everyone going to say? Of course not. Okay, so we make rule number 2. If you are, you will be kicked out of our dugout. And that can be from a late freshman ad too, not just a JC kid. But that last 20%, you're just trying not to get sour. You can get that 60% broken into 30 and go 50, 30, 20 within the first week that you're working with people. They can really trust you and believe you. And the key word there is trust. They've got to trust that what you're presenting is going to help them in some way. And then you just keep working down the line. And hopefully that last 20% at some point maybe becomes 10. But we can't clear an organization, I don't think, of having a 0% on that bottom end that just is below the line and just, it's his fault, it's not my fault, you know, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more basis on it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
If you want to move up the ladder and become a head coach from an assistant down the road, who would your top 2 or 3 students be?
So from an assistant to a head coach, number 1, be very extroverted. Meet as many people as you can. So in any sport, and I know a lot of us have national conventions, the best place in the world to meet multiple coaches. We just had a guy come from Emory College or Emory University. He just moved out, came to our camp yesterday, which was Tuesday, introduced himself. He was an assistant coach back there, followed his girlfriend, out to Seattle, and so went to me, Lindsey Meggs, who's the head coach at University of Washington. In his first 2 days of town, introduced himself and said, if there's anything that comes up that I can get involved with, I'd like to volunteer. So being very, very extroverted and get out and shake hands and meet people. The thing that you'll learn about in sport and maybe football schemes, because I coached college football for 2 years, maybe football schemes are different, but a lot of what we teach as in our sport hasn't changed in 100 years. The mechanics or the fundamentals of our sport. You know, I know there's a lot of crazy stuff that's been into it, so you need to impress someone as an assistant coach based on what you can give the program from a personality standpoint with the knowledge piece. Because I can teach you how to be an outfield coach if you've never coached outfield. I mean, there's just certain priorities to it. So extroverted and get to, this is great. If you're looking, you know, I would try to meet ADs in here and just introduce yourself if you're an assistant coach now and want to be a head coach. And if you're regional, I stopped chasing that deal a long time ago. My wife, Cam, she's been with me 19 years. And our first 5 years, we had 7 head coaching opportunities across the country in a lot warmer places, a lot better conferences. And Mama said, we're staying right here. So I'd figure out with your significant other too where you get to go. Because sometimes you're going to be limited to that. But if you have a specific region too, reach out to those coaches right away. Reach out to those administrators. Anybody else?
Can you add to that a little bit? Just maybe explain a little bit about education and degrees related as you try to move maybe from JC to Division I, Division II, just kind of what they're looking for as far as background.
Sure. Our old days, where's Scotty? Scotty, who was, Farrington was the last JC guy I know in our sport of baseball. Steve Farrington, that went from a JC to a Division I head coach. Wouldn't you say that we know of in the Northwest?
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah. So number one, you got to be willing to take baby steps. So I went JC assistant, JC head coach, volunteer assistant, paid assistant, head assistant, head coach. Educationally, you've got to have your degree. If there's people sitting in here that are wondering, okay, when I should get my degree done, get it done. We have a new volunteer coming into our program that has to show he is, and he was in pro ball for 6 years, so there's a little excuse there, that he is working towards his degree for our administration to even allow us to bring him on board. And then they will give him a timeline as when he has to get that thing done. So number one, bachelor's, please get it. And I imagine a lot of us have it in here, but an extended degree creates extended opportunities. I don't know why. I don't think it's fair sometimes. I know one of the greatest coaches I know in the world is right down in Corvallis with a bachelor's. You know, before you have to have an extended, it doesn't make us any more street smart or coaching smart, but academia, man, they want to have that on your resume. It's big on the board of trustees. The higher you go up, the more education you at least need to have to give you a better opportunity to get there. I love that at the junior college level, a master's is even preferred. I've seen that on a couple of job opens. You know what? That's awesome. Absolutely. But also give some of us some time to finish our school and there's some really good coaches out there that need opportunities while they're going to school because it's not cheap anymore. So I think the University of Phoenixes and places like that have really opened up our abilities to allow people to get education while they're still just fighting to survive in society for the cost of it. So the higher the more, I hate to say it, hopefully that'll go away at some point. Last question, because I know we got some other speakers, and I've got 2 recruits to see at 4 o'clock.
Coach,
Yes?
you talked about energy and effort and attitude, bringing those from the top all the way down in the system. Can you talk a little bit about the bringing that energy and so forth, and the expectation that you have, whether it's a volunteer assistant, whether it's a part-time assistant, because a lot of times we hear, you know, we don't want these expectations because they're only part-time. Could you speak to, does that even really need to make a difference?
So, yeah, and I would slap somebody that said that. I mean, just the expectations is, again, from the bottom part of whoever's doing the smallest things in your program all the way up. But as a leader standpoint, too, you better make those part-timers or volunteers feel like they are absolutely contagious to your program. Because they are. They're going to be your closest link. The less people are around your organization, which sounds funny, the closer they get to the nucleus. Because they're not in the gossip part of it, or they're not in the war rooms. They just hear what's good, and obviously it's from the nucleus, which in our standpoint would be from players. So they're actually your closest link to the nucleus, is what we say. So if you're a volunteer, bless your heart, we can't thank you enough. But your expectation is, if I go away, I want you to run this hitting circle, and you need to run it like I'm there, and the expectation is huge. Please never put yourself in a role. Whatever your job title is, that's just what it is. Okay, for now, and obviously we can fight to create a different title, but for that 20 minutes or that 30 minutes or whatever you're doing, you're the head skipper. You're the Princess Diane. Is that maybe a good one to say? I forgot it was Princess Diane. They're having a show about her here in a little bit. 2-hour special on Sunday night, if you're wondering. But put yourself in that 20 or 30 minute role, and you be the king or queen, man. And the more you do that, the more you're going to develop confidence in yourself, Because I'm telling you, as you're trying to go up the ladder, you better have a little bit of arrogance and confidence about you, because people, as we know, including our student athletes, they see right through it if you're fake. So the more you put yourself in that situation, I think the more confident you grow, and obviously the better you can present yourself for when you have your opportunity to run your little part of this world or sport, you can have some success. So you guys, thank you very much. Last thing I just want to end with, and again, I'm being very sincere, thank you for what you do. This is a great conference. I do want to be able to get on the webpage a little easier. Just, I want to keep throwing that out there. And maybe a little bit more of the social media stuff. I'd like a little bit quicker to my Twitter, because I couldn't figure out who won the championships. It was a little late, so I'm going to throw that out there. But you guys are a huge influence. In JC, baseball, or any sport, we were just saying it in camp, it's a great stepping stone for our young athletes to help them get better in the classroom, or we've got a lot of 4 points that are in the classroom that they can get more physically strong as a male or female, refine their skills, and then go on to a 4-year university. So you guys are so crucial to the growth of our 4-year schools that we can't thank you enough. And I've told my wife, and I've told this people before, when I retire, or when I get towards the end, I want to end up back at a junior college. It was the funnest days of my life. I did it for 10 years, 3 years as an assistant, 7 at Lane, and I love that turnover. And hopefully you love that turnover, and if you're a coach, you've got to love that recruiting part of it too, man, because the wars are on all the time. We've got guys committed in 2019. We got our first 2020 commitment yesterday. Yay. Guy just learned how to wipe his ass. So. Hey, thank you and good luck this season.